Well, welcome back. Good afternoon. You're at the Board of County Commissioners Land Use Meeting. It is Tuesday, June 12th, and we are going to continue with our agenda. I will ask this ahead of time since we did have a break. Are there new people in the room that have not been sworn in who would be presenting testimony? Okay. So anybody who intends to present testimony, evidence, or otherwise be heard on any matter scheduled for consideration at today's meeting, stand, raise your right hand so the clerk may swear you in.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. I will now turn over to staff to continue with the agenda.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's been quite a while since we've had a meeting that started after lunch, but we're back. Item G5 is rezoning PD 18-0278.
Let's go ahead and open for oral argument before you explain. May I have a motion? Motion by Commissioner White, second by Commissioner Miller. Please record your vote to open for oral argument.
Motion carried 5-0.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Rezoning PD 18-0278 is the subject of G5. It's approximately a 10.5-acre site located on the east side of Williams Road, approximately 335 feet south of May Street. The current zoning is RSC6, which permits 6 units per acre, generally 7,000 square foot lots. This is a planned development. The proposal is for 63 townhomes on the 10.5 acres. A portion of the site includes some environmentally sensitive land. The site design and the plan development has been conditioned and designed to keep the homes out of that area of the site. Additionally, the massing and orientation of the buildings out of that area, as well as having the orientation, the front doors face internal, which orients them away from the north and south property lines. Additionally, there's going to be screening that exceeds the code. Right now, our code would require a 5-foot buffer. There's going to be a 10-foot buffer along the perimeter of the site, and within that buffer, there'll be a 6-foot vertical screen and trees planted every 20 feet. In consideration of the site design and the screening and the orientation that we just discussed, staff felt that we could find it approvable, and we are recommending approval with conditions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We are on G5 as the applicant here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. William Malloy, 325 South Boulevard. The only thing I need to add factually at this point to what Mr. Moretta said was that I had some unexpected opposition at the ZHM, and we did have a meeting shortly thereafter, but procedurally there's not a lot I can do with my plan between the ZHM and here. So if there's any opportunity for flexibility or compromise, I'm more than open to it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for offering that. We don't get that too often. So I'm going to turn back to staff. Now, I know we're limited to what happens at the zoning hearing, Master, but can we, in like board discussion or before we vote, offer conditions or something that helps move the item along, or can he offer something?
Yeah, certainly, Commissioner, yeah, answer is yes. There's opportunity for the applicant to offer or the board to raise additional conditions or changes to the project to help bring it to a successful position. Certainly.
Okay, so it should, process-wise, wait to hear what comes up in the oral argument, and then in his rebuttal he could offer some changes.
Responsive to it, yes.
Is that okay?
That would be appropriate.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll move into the oral argument portion, and we do have 4 speakers signed up in oral argument in opposition. Rusty Ludlow, Holly Ogden, Kathy Pendergrass, and Joseph Smith. So if y'all want to line up over there, and you have 10 minutes total between all of you to speak. And please identify yourself before you start speaking.
Hi, thank you for having us today. I'm Kathy Pendergrass from 1906 Duffield Place in Brandon, Florida. I'm kind of behind the property. I have been sworn in. So Mr. Smith here has the PowerPoint slides, so he's going to be scanning through those for us.
Excuse me. I'm looking at the record from the ZHM hearing, and I'm not seeing the photo that you had up a minute ago, or this particular PowerPoint slide. So I need to remind you that we're limited to the record of the zoning hearing master hearing. So anything that was placed into the record and shown at the ZHM can be shown now, but nothing new that wasn't shown at the ZHM can be put up on the overhead now.
These were part of the goals and policies that were in your recommendation.
I know, but if
But
it's
it
not
wasn't- okay,
presented at the
then
hearing, you can't
You know
present
it
it.
was there, so just keep flipping. So after receiving Officer Finch's recommendation, we were all very disappointed and realized there were several issues submitted into evidence, written and oral, that were not resolved or completely explained the night of the hearing or in the hearing officer's report, specifically the staff's interpretation of the land use goals and policies. The future allowable use for the 3 lots north of the wetlands, overflow parking, and the idea that the daily transportation 63 townhomes will decrease the traffic versus 24 to 28 single-family detached homes. So we still have questions about these things. Also, there's ambiguity regarding who the developer is. I'm sorry, that wasn't brought up. We still have concerns about the wetlands where it says almost completely exclusive from the planned development. We feel that the staff misinterpreted the goals related to ensure concurrency, preserve Brandon's family-friendly small town home qualities, concentrating densities in certain areas, and compatibility with the existing structures. The existing development patterns.
Excuse me.
Well, that's from the transcript. That's transcript from the testimony that night.
Oh, it's a transcript.
Sorry, a visual aid like that, it has to have been presented at the zoning hearing master. So you can certainly speak to that subject if it was part of the transcript, but you can't put anything up on the overhead that wasn't put up
So no
on the
background.
overhead.
So no background on the.
Correct.
Okay,
Nothing,
okay.
nothing new on the overhead unless it
Okay.
was shown on the overhead at the ZHM.
Got it. Well, some of this was turned in and put in optics prior to the ZHM. Some of it wasn't. That may have been, but anyway. Well, see, that's part of the application, but that wasn't. So let's just keep talking. The property is surrounded on the north, south, and east by single-family homes 4 miles, which I did mention at the ZHM. And there are only a couple single-family, and they're all single-family detached homes. There might be a couple duplexes. But for miles, and I measured it, it's about 5 miles from Williams Road east. They're all single-family detached, and about 2 miles to the north and south. They're all single-family detached homes. So the report says that scattered throughout the area to the west and the north, there are some, what do you call them, townhomes and apartments. But I did bring up that there is a traffic diverter that was installed southbound Williams Road off to where Ashley Furniture is. And that traffic diverter was put there intentionally, according to Rhonda Storms, that was being put in to keep the heavy traffic and the multifamily homes and light industrial off of Williams Road. This planned development would bring that back onto Williams Road in our community. Also, if you look at our small town, it's a connector road. It's very family-friendly, kind of country area. And then to throw townhomes into this one spot, now they're saying it's plus minus 10.5 acres, but it's really 4.85 acres that they want to put all of this density right there. Okay, so let me go on. Are all successive owners and developers bound to those commitments and restrictions? We ask this because the land is still for sale, and we want to know for sure. We need confirmation that that will be held true. There are 3 home sites, and I brought this up. I asked, should those 3 home sites be removed from this plan? There's 4.85 acres, 5 acres of wetland, and then 3 single-family home sites on the north side of the water. If that density is incorporated into this folio, what is going to happen to those? Are people restricted from ever building on that? Because that density is already accounted for over here. So we need clarification and confirmation of what can, because I'm not a land attorney. I don't know what can be done. As far as the garages facing east and west, so there's no doors or garages facing our homes, there's going to be a 6-foot fence. We won't see the front, the garages, or the front facing. So it's our impression that this design does us no favors, but allows whoever the developer is going to be to put in more homes. That's where the 63 comes from. So if they oriented them differently, they couldn't put in as many, but I can't bring it up. There are reasons that we talked to Mr. Malloy about that. We're concerned about the community gathering area because it's right on the wetlands. We do have an alligator. We do have other wildlife. We're concerned about a pond, and the pond as is proposed right now is where there are 6 grand oaks. We're very, very concerned about vehicles and overflow parking because once that's opened up, we fear the water is going to become a amusement area, and there are going to be vehicles hopping the curb and parking, 3-wheelers, hot rods. We're concerned about that. We want to make sure that that's secure and that there's overflow parking for guests and that they're not parking between the building and the home site, in the wetlands.
And you have a little over 4 minutes left if you want the
Now, here
other
we are.
speakers to come up.
We're really concerned about the traffic analysis. We do not understand how 63 townhomes can decrease traffic versus 24 to 30 single-family detached homes. We're totally, anyway. I just want to say we feel Brandon is the heart of Hillsborough County, and we live there because we like that small-town atmosphere, and we want to preserve that.
Okay.
Smith?
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon,
Good
Joseph
afternoon.
Smith. I live at 1907 May Street, and I have been sworn in. As Kathy had mentioned, we do have a very small town environment. I purchased my home roughly 10 years ago, and it's a small in stature, single story, 1962 built house. And I've put roughly $100,000 worth of repairs into it. It was more or less on the verge of being condemned when I purchased it. And I've put a lot of effort into bringing the house back to the standard that the community would like to see it, and as have a lot of my other neighbors. Now, when I bought that house, it was with the understanding that the property behind me was probably not going to remain wooded forever, but that it was for single-family home use. And had I known that I would potentially be sandwiched one day in between townhouses, I would not have invested that much money or time into that house, nor would many of my neighbors. We like the small hometown feel that we have there. Another issue that I'd had and that I did have to sink some money into is septic systems. Now, neighbors on my side of the development, on the north side, many of them do have septic systems still in well water. Not so much on the opposite side, but runoff is a big issue. That side of Lakewood is very low, and right now it's all permeable surface behind the house. But with 63 townhomes being brought in to that immediate 4.8 acres worth of property behind the home, you're looking at a lot of hard surface between the roofs, the parking structures, and I just don't see how that much runoff is going to be placed anywhere when I have up to an inch, inch and a half of water sitting in my backyard after a couple hard rains for a day, sometimes a day and a half before it finally goes away. So we're looking at potential issues with our septic systems, with neighbors' wells, or just flooding, even if those facilities aren't impacted. Now, just like I purchased my home knowing what was supposed to be built or potentially going to be one day built behind my house, the owner of the property purchased it knowing what it was zoned for. So if the end result was going to be, let's build townhouses, I feel that the owner should have looked for property that was zoned for townhouses. I knew what I was getting into, or I thought I did when I purchased my home, as did my neighbors. And I feel like the owner of this property should have known what he was getting into when he purchased it. But instead, it seems like the flavor of the day is, let's get the property rezoned for my financial gain, the current owners, at the expense of property values and the homeowners that have lived around it thinking that this was going to be single-family homes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. And there was a third speaker? Was there 3 people?
Couldn't make it in today, sir.
Oh, okay. And actually, we have 4, so Rusty, Ludlow. Okay, okay, very good. Thank you. So applicant, would you like to come forward? And you got 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
Yes, ma'am. William Malloy again. Unfortunately, I don't think I heard anything specific that I can address in a condition in that. I'm just going to go through kind of the bullet points, the notes I took. The wetlands absolutely will be preserved. They're about half the site. They're not going to be touched. EPC controls that pond, and then there's a 30-foot, standard setback around that. Williams Road, it's a zoning condition that will be improved from the project to the nearest standard roadway, both ways. The stormwater, the pond, and the parking are all controlled by the Land Development Code at site development. That's nothing really I can stipulate to today. That's down the road. And then obviously runoff and stormwater from the project per SwiftMud and the state can affect any properties upstream or down. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I don't see any questions at this time. Thank you very much. Planning Commission?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Tony Garcia, Planning Commission staff. The proposed rezoning would allow for a change from residential single-family conventional 6 to planned development to allow for the development of 63 single-family attached townhome units. The proposed maximum of 63 single-family attached residential units would allow development comparable to the suburban residential development pattern in the surrounding area, specifically existing multifamily and single-family attached residential along Williams Road to the west. The proposal maximizes the density allowed by the Res 6 future land use category and thus meets minimum density required by Policy 1.2. The site is located in the urban service area where future land use policies support growth and higher density development. The applicant has requested a waiver for additional building setbacks as required per the LDC. Planning Commission staff does not oppose the waiver due to the proposed orientation of the townhome units, resulting in front and rear yards not facing adjacent residential uses. The applicant also proposes additional buffering to minimize the decreased setbacks. Therefore, approval of this waiver would not negatively impact the surrounding area. The proposed modification is located within the suburban character district as described by the Brandon Community Plan and meets the intent and vision for this district. Given the surrounding area's development pattern with multifamily and single-family attached in close proximity along a collector roadway, specifically Williams Road, the proposed rezoning would be comparable and compatible. Based upon those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed request consistent with the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoning Hearing Master?
The zoning hearing master considered the request to rezone 10.5 acres from RSC 6, excuse me, to planned development to develop a maximum of 63 townhomes. The request includes a waiver to the additional required, or to the required additional setback for building height over 20 feet, which the applicant justifies by agreeing to provide a 20-foot building setback along the northern and southern boundary, which will include a 10-foot buffer with type B screening. Additionally, the applicant has agreed to orient the buildings to decrease the impact to adjacent residential development. The testimony in opposition received at the ZHM focused primarily on traffic created by the proposed townhomes, as Williams Road is substandard. Concerns were also expressed regarding the possible impact of the development to the wetland and water runoff and flooding issues. The zoning hearing master found that the concerns expressed by the neighbors in opposition are mitigated by the applicant's commitment to orient the buildings away from the adjacent residential and the installation of the type B buffer along the northern and southern property boundaries. And the zoning hearing master also found that the developer will be required to improve Williams Road to county standards, which will benefit the existing neighborhood. The zoning hearing master found that the request is compatible with the character of the area and consistent with the intent of the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan, and recommended approval.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now into board discussion and action. Board discussion, action, board action. Board action. Whose district is it in? I believe it's in, to Williams Road. Is this Sefner? Okay. So we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Chris. Is there a second by Commissioner Higginbotham? Commissioner Higginbotham, you're in the queue. You're recognized.
Thank you. And these questions that the folks brought up as concerns, I don't know that they're objections, but concerns. It seems to me that these are going to be answered and addressed along the way through the process. So I feel comfortable moving it forward now and getting those issues resolved.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just had some questions about what the residents brought up. One is I didn't see it quite, but the whole a traffic study that showed that 63 townhouses would decrease traffic from the 24 to 30 single-family homes.
Commissioner, I'll have Charles White respond to that. I'm not sure that we actually got a traffic study with this rezoning due to the size.
Good afternoon, Charles.
Charles White, Public Works Department. I think what she's referring to in our staff report, what we do is we look at what the existing zoning is and what can be built under the existing zoning. I think the existing zoning was an RSC 6, which is 6 units to the acre. The property is 10.5 acres. So,
Ma'am, no, you can't comment.
I mean, in the analysis, it says you can do up to 60 units. Then she compares that to the 63 townhomes that they're proposing. Single-family homes generate more trips than townhomes. So the net difference was a reduction, and that's what that reduction is. It's comparing what could be built versus what's being proposed. And we look at the net difference because those trips could be built without coming in for the zoning. You could do the single-family homes now.
And just to clarify so I understand, it looks like quite a big bit of wetlands on this property.
And I mean, and that's why, we say up to. Now, they probably can't build 60. It may be 50, it may be less than that. Typically what happens is a single family home generates 1 peak hour trip, one peak hour. A townhome generates 0.6 trip. So I mean, that's what our ITE trip generation rates, the average tells us. So that's what we apply.
Oh, that's interesting information. I did not know that a single-family home would just generate 1 peak hour trip, nor a 0.6 trip. Seems very low.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Okay, there's no more discussion. Commissioner Chris? Oh, you already. We have a motion by Commissioner Chris, seconded by Commissioner Higginbotham. Is there any further discussion? Please record your vote.
Motion carried 5-1. Commissioner Miller voted no.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're now to H1A and H1B.
Thank you, Commissioners. Both these items are public hearings, and they are related. H1A pertains to DRI 17-1229, and the related zoning action is application number 17-1293. Starting with the zoning action first, the zoning action is to reallocate the distribution of currently approved uses. Starting in Track 3, the currently approved uses office, the proposed uses neighborhood commercial, hotel office, multifamily, and townhomes. Track 5 is neighborhood commercial, light industrial, and hotel. The proposed use is now going to general commercial, neighborhood commercial, hotel, office, and multifamily. In Track 6, the currently approved uses are neighborhood commercial, light industrial. The proposed uses are neighborhood commercial and office. In Track 7, the current use is service center, light industrial, and the proposed use is general commercial, hotel, and office. In the DRI side, the action that's proposed in the DRI side, it entails a number of different things, but the thrust of it is to approve specifically uses, entitlements that already exist in the DRI. So this is a request to specifically identify those as being permissible. It's essentially a housekeeping action that's going to work together on the DRI side to speak to the zoning side. When we evaluated this, the main concern was allocating the entitlements in a way that would serve to preserve uses on the site, and these tracts are proposed for job-producing uses. And because of that, condition 8.13 was inserted that caps the amount of freestanding commercial to 200,000 unless it's coupled with other job-producing uses, for example, like the office. Having said that, staff has found both these items approvable. And these are public hearings.
Yes, thank you very much. Applicant? Great, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Andrea Zellman, Buchanan, Ingersoll, Rooney, 401 East Jackson Street. And given the hour and the apparent lack of interest, I'll try to keep my remarks brief. I do want to thank the staff. We worked very hard with Colleen, with John Healy, with Nancy Takamori, with Mike Williams and James Ratliff of Transportation. Adam Gormley and Ron Barton held our feet to the fire on the economic development condition that was mentioned earlier. Just want to make a couple of things clear. My client, Bayview Properties, owns property along Big Bend Road, but only tracts 3, 5, and 6, approximately 70 acres. There's a much larger parcel, over 100 acres, that is also part of this DRI, but is owned by a different developer, NRI, and we're not touching their entitlements. As was already mentioned, really what we're trying to do right now, the property's approved for light industrial and service center uses, and we're trying to change it to uses that we believe are more compatible with the way the property to the south of us has developed with single-family homes, Waterset and Covington Park. And I want to make clear that these changes are not adding any new residential units. We already had conceptual approval for 472 multifamily units, and so all we're doing is seeking specific approval for those, but the greater part of what we are seeking is, again, commercial, office, hotel. And at this time, I just want to give my client an opportunity to address you because she would like to tell you a little more about the history of the property. And
Great.
Her name is Nyla Thompson.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Nyla Thompson, 101 East Mahoney Street, Plant City. And good afternoon, commissioners and staff. Thank you for this time. I am the owner and applicant, but I'm not a developer. I am seeking to change, to preserve the integrity of the community, and to provide the uses and services the community needs and wants. I was born and raised on this property. I've probably walked every inch of it. I've grown cattle on it and crops, and the third generation to do so. It was never my idea that this would be developed. I thought I would live and die on my farm, just as my parents and my grandparents before me. But in the late 60s and early 70s, decisions were made in Washington and Tallahassee to extend I-75. And folks sitting in a room drew lines on maps through vacant property. That vacant property was my farm. And I-75 cut us in half. So I don't know how many of you know about cattle, but it's kind of hard to move cows across 6 lanes of interstate to new pasture. So I knew life as I knew it was changed. So I'm trying to do the right thing, to present things that the community has told me they need and want. There's no grocery store, no dry cleaners, no restaurants on site. To get any of these services, residents have to drive at least 3 miles one way. So what I'm proposing is to take away and the industrial and service center uses, which, a little history, back in the 80s when this DRI was originally done, there was no county sewer. So a package plant was going to be on the property. It was going to be wrapped in industrial to buffer the residential uses. Well, when county sewer became available, I believe that became a moot point. So that's why I'm trying to move forward. The communities to the south are beautiful communities. People have invested their money in a home, and I want to preserve a good frontage gateway to their community. So I ask that you will give me a favorable approval for this, and I thank staff for all their help, and I thank you for your kind indulgence today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us the history of the property. That was really important to understand that in the context of what, you know, why you're doing it. It's really to benefit the community, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. And just very briefly, I just want to point out that we did add a number of conditions to the zoning to address concerns that were raised by the neighbors. The property owners south of Track 7, we agreed to, and in addition to the buffers and screening required by the code, we agreed to preserve a 30-foot vegetation strip, and as a result of that, they agreed to withdraw a petition that they had previously submitted, and I believe Todd Pressman will confirm that. We already mentioned the condition we agreed to for the county's economic development department, and also on Track 3, we had agreed to additional buffers and screening to protect those neighbors. At the zoning hearing master and in some of the emails that were sent, the objections that were raised were primarily addressed to traffic on Big Bend Road. I think many of the people that wrote were under the false impression that we were trying to get new development, and yes, it's new development in the sense that the property's vacant now, but actually the entitlements that we're seeking to have approved now generate less trips than the entitlements that are currently approved on the property. And your transportation staff addressed that at the ZHM hearing. He testified that it's actually 1,000 plus less trips per day with the uses that we're seeking now rather than what is currently approved. And as Nyla mentioned, the types of uses that we're proposing will hopefully serve the people in the neighborhood, so they'll actually have to travel less on Big Bend Road to go to the store or go to the doctor's office. So again, I'm cutting my remarks short. I'd be glad to answer any additional questions, and we thank you for your time. I just want to add that the zoning hearing master did find that there was competent and substantial evidence in the record supporting this. The Planning Commission recommends approval. Your staff does as well, and we would appreciate you doing the same. And again, I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are going to do the public hearing for both H1A and H1B at the same time, correct? And we'll vote on them also. So now we're going to move into the public hearing portion, and everybody will have 3 minutes. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of H1A and H1B?
Good afternoon, Todd Pressman, 334 East Lake Road, number 102 in Palm Harbor, Florida. I'll make it very quick. We worked extensively with the applicant. I'm representing a number of the residents who abut on the south, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Werge, to name a few. And we did move forward to ensure a greater buffer that will preserve the tree line. And there's also pretty substantial buffers that are part of the code that work as well. So we were able to move forward and be able to support the request as is. Those conditions and some other documents are already in the file and are, again, a part of the file. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of H1A or H1B? Anyone here wishing to speak in opposition to H1A and H1B? Okay, seeing nothing. Board action?
Move the item.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Kemp. I would just like to make some brief comments, as this is in my district, and I am sensitive to anything that happens along Big Bend Road. You know that, but I think the fact that you're making the entitlement better is actually an improvement for the whole community. And I think, and you are going to bring jobs. I mean, that's another thing. We need jobs in South County, and we need job centers. So in a way, I see many more pluses than minuses on this, and am very, very happy to support it. So with that, we have a motion by Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Kemp and Higginbotham. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioners. That brings us up to the K items. These are the staff items on the agenda. K1 is an update by the Planning Commission on 2045 population and job allocation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Melissa Zornita, Executive Director for the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. Thank you for having me here today to give you an update on the progress we've made on our population and employment allocations looking out to 2045. This afternoon, I'd like to give you some brief background and context. Then I'm going to ask Johnny Wong with the MPO staff to share some about the regional transportation scenarios that we are working and coordinating with. Then I'll be back to share some of the land use implications of those for Hillsborough County and our next steps. Just again for context, today we're just under or in 2016 we were just under 1.3 million people and 830,000 jobs for Hillsborough County. And as we look to 2045, we're looking at reaching over 2 million people and over 1.2 million jobs. That's 714,000 more people, 454,000 more jobs. It's a lot. And as we look at what is available for future development, I've been here and presented to you all in the past that we've analyzed where there's vacant and developable land in all 4 jurisdictions. What are some of the opportunities for redevelopment, taking a pretty conservative approach to how we look at that. And we've arrived at about 52,000 acres of land that are opportunities within the existing urban service area and our existing city boundaries. So we've taken a look at if we were to build those out under the adopted future land use categories and how those typically build out. So many of our categories do not build to the maximum. We're not assuming that that would change in this part of our work here. And that would put us at an approximate build out of the urban service area and the cities in the range of 2035. So we don't reach 2045. That presents us with some choices. And that's what we want to explore through this process. We want to look and test different alternatives of how growth might occur and how some of the transportation and other infrastructure improvements that are being discussed at a regional level might influence that. And understand the implications of those choices. What are the financial consequences? What are the infrastructure consequences? And ultimately bring together with your input and the county staff input a hybrid plan that would inform a number of the other planning efforts like the long-range transportation plan, ultimately the update of the comprehensive plan, some of the master plans that ultimately get done. So as you can see in this schematic, there are a lot of plans going on right now. A lot, I know you all are invited to a lot of the same meetings I am about different transportation projects, whether it's the regional transit feasibility study or TB Next. There's a lot of conversation going on in our community about that, and we are trying to very much align with those efforts and also position and understand where the county wants to go so that we are giving input to those efforts that reflects where Hillsborough County wants to grow. And that's what really the hybrid vision will do, is it will inform all of these other efforts in terms of what direction Hillsborough County, how you all would like to grow. So with that context in mind, I would like to, one of the things that is occurring right now is that the tri-county MPOs, Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough, have been working on some regional scenarios of different transportation improvements. And I would like to ask Johnny Wong with the MPO to describe those briefly to you, and then I'll be back with some of the implications of those.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Once again, my name is Johnny Wong, MPO staff. I'm the project manager for the outreach portion of the LRTP. Unlike some of the previous LRTP updates, this one is going to include a strong regional component to show how transportation projects in Hillsborough County connect to a wider regional vision and vice versa. And so because of that regional element, we're coordinating very closely with our counterparts in Pinellas and Pasco counties. As part of our scenario planning process, we assembled a working group of staff from around the region, asked them to come together and identify what they see as the future drivers of change. And so through that process, the group identified 3 exaggerated visions of the future. Just to be clear, we recognize that all of these scenarios are very exaggerated. That is to say, no single future outlined in these scenarios will become the reality in 2045. But our hope is to take this to the public and have them identify the specific desirable elements of each scenario so that we can combine them at a later time and form a more realistic vision of the future, a hybrid that'll be adopted into the final LRTP. And so to get that feedback, the 3 MPOs are going to be presenting this information at a lot of pop-up events over the summer. We've already worked to schedule about 50 community meetings in Hillsborough County alone, and we're still adding more. But the primary tool that we're going to be using to get feedback is through an online survey called MetroQuest. We presented this to the TMA leadership group in May, and I think it was met with a very favorable response. So when a user logs on to our website and they're taking the survey, they're greeted with the screen that's shown on the bottom right-hand side of this slide, which explains the purpose of the survey. If they click over to the second screen, they're able to identify their priorities and kind of convey to us what's important and rank them in an order of the top 5. So once they've done that, they click over to the third slide, which introduces those 3 exaggerated scenarios. So at the top of the screen, you'll see 3 tabs showing strategy 1, 2, and 3, as well as on each page, there's a brief description. And those priorities that they identified in the previous screen carry over to this one so that they can see how their scenario performs according to the priorities that they've listed. And the way that we kind of calculate the arrows that you see to the bottom right is through data from our regional planning model. So when they click on the tabs at the top of the screen, they will see a map of the scenario, and scenario 1 roughly corresponds to the current trend plus some investments in transportation technology. It includes a number of targeted roadway projects in orange on the map, and you can see that there's some east-west corridors in Pasco County, in Pinellas, the US 19 corridor, and in our county, Citrus Park Drive Extension, Gandy Boulevard, Lithia Pinecrest, and some improvements at Big Bend Road, as well as the bus rapid transit on the 275 corridor from South St. Pete all the way north into Pasco County. In strategy 2, this strategy roughly corresponds with the Belton Boulevard concept. The goal here is to reconnect some of the neighborhoods in Tampa's urban core. And the way that that will be accomplished in this scenario is by converting I-275 to a street-level boulevard with BRT running north and south. That's from downtown Tampa to Bayers Avenue. And some of the regional traffic will be redistributed away from the urban core, kind of onto the outskirts of the region. That'll be running on SR 54 in Pasco, north and south on McMullen Booth Road in Pinellas, across 275 straight through to I-4, and then again north to south on I-75. The third strategy is transit-oriented development. This includes significant investments that can incentivize or encourage more dense growth in the existing towns and cities. If you see on the map, or if you look on the map, the bus rapid transit is coded with the green lines. The existing CSX rail lines are shown in purple. The passenger rail that can connect the Tampa Bay region to Orlando and then to the rest of the state is in orange. And then at the very southern point, you see the water ferry. So once they provide their initial reaction to those three scenarios overall, they're able to drill down into the unique elements comprising each of those three scenarios. And this is really helpful because let's say someone taking the survey has kind of a lukewarm response to the trend overall, but they're really supportive of that AV technology. Here's where they get an opportunity to tell us how they feel. This is going to be really important to collect data in building the hybrid that will go into the final version of the LRTP. We're getting ready to kick off. The MetroQuest is going to go live on July 20th. We're going to unveil that at the Regional Transit Forum at Tampa International Airport. It's going to run through to the 1st of October. We're still looking to schedule meetings with community groups, and when the time comes, it would be really helpful if you all would kind of build some recognition about this survey. If you can Facebook and retweet and mention it, that would be really helpful. I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa.
Thank you. So now we'll turn to some of the implications of some of these choices in Hillsborough County from a land use perspective. So this is what we're projecting a trend plus scenario would look like. As you can see, the development moves beyond our existing urban service area, which is the dotted line, or beyond the city limits. This scenario would have increased need for extensions of water and sewer, local roadways. So we are working with the jurisdictional staff on calculating some of the costs for each of these scenarios based on that. So this would show how continued development without any change in our policy direction, except to expand the urban service area, would progress. Under the Belt and Boulevard scenario, we incorporated some of the recommendations of the ULI panel regarding the I-4 expansion. And as you'll see, there's more focused growth around the I-4, I-75 interchange there, as well as some of the darker colors coming out here towards McIntosh Road, consistent with their recommendations that seem to align well with the idea of toll lanes moving traffic along I-4 and I-75. One of the things that we looked at in this scenario was ensuring that we could accommodate the employment within our urban service area. However, the population could not be accommodated in. So we actually have about 40,000 people who would not be accommodated in Hillsborough County in this scenario. They would be living in Pasco or in Polk, and we thought that was worthwhile to test what the implications of that were. How will that influence our transportation? How will that maybe exacerbate or not some of our existing congestion problems? So that's something that is a trade-off in this scenario. And then lastly, we have the transit-oriented scenario. And this, as Mr. Wong mentioned, has a significant amount of transit investment. But due to that investment, we were able to accommodate all of the population and jobs projected for Hillsborough County within the urban service area. So those are some of the trade-offs and the choices that this process, we hope, will illustrate and generate conversation about how we as a community want to proceed in terms of growth and investment in infrastructure. So as Mr. Wong described, there's going to be outreach at a regional level over the summer to get some input on the transportation scenarios. And we look to have continued discussions with all 4 local governments during that same time frame and beyond to get input on how we put together the pieces of these different scenarios into what we envision for our future for Hillsborough County. Our goal is to have that done by the end of 2018, and that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I definitely have some comments, but I'll save them until after I hear everybody else's. Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief comment. You know, just with this initial high-level look, I tend to like the Belton Boulevard scenario. But Madam Chair, I also have 2 issues that will ultimately lead to 2 motions on the floor, I think.
Okay.
One at a time, of course.
Sure.
Commissioners, I'd like to speak to an issue that's closely related to this population projections item. As you know, we're due to discuss CPA 17-21 and LDC 18-0370 at the workshop at the conclusion of this meeting. That's the item that deals with the RP2 areas and the proposed density bonus out in the Baum area. And in anticipation of the likely results of the East Rural Study, which was commissioned at the request of this board, I've been actively working on an East County overlay district to establish a framework for this rural area in an effort to preserve a rural choice for residents of this county. I've been told that the public believes that additional opportunities to weigh in on the RP2 issue is needed. It's my understanding that some of the public engagement and public outreach probably has not been as robust and efficient as some would hope. I've also asked staff to work with the applicant on the RP2 item in an effort to make the community enhancements referenced in the item transportation intensive. And it's my understanding that staff would like more time for that exercise. The RP2 item being discussed later is so closely related to these issues, and since its purpose is to serve as a transitionary zone between the suburban and rural areas, and because of the important decisions yet to be made on how we do infill development in Hillsborough County, I move to continue CPA 17-21 and LDC Amendment 18-0370 to the October Comprehensive Plan Amendment cycle.
Okay. That's item F5A on the land use workshop agenda. Okay.
And I was
Gotcha.
and I was told by staff that it's so closely related to this item with respect to the population projections that I could make a motion at this meeting in this context to go ahead and continue them and get them on the next cycle.
Okay. So we have a motion by Commissioner White. Yeah, we've got 3 people missing. I mean, I think this needs to have more discussion, but I'll see what everybody says. We have a motion by Commissioner White. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Kemp. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. I actually think it should be, that we should have even more time to be looking at that than October. But I'll just address that, and then I guess I'll get back to this. In terms of the RP2, as you know, I was the one person who voted about not moving it on at the time. And to address that, this amendment covers the rural area of Baum, which at the time of the last census, 2010, and I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly in terms of this, had less than 1,500 residents, less than 1,500 residents. Baum is a place of two-lane country roads and farms. I think we need to be really honest about what we're talking about here. This is, the RP2 would exponentially increase the population and forever alter the way of life in that area. In many ways, our county. What we're doing is legislating. It's not a rezoning. And so when we legislate and we look to change our comprehensive plan and our land development code, when they're asking, when developers or applicants are asking that, we need to be very sure that any of the modified requirements create meaningful improvements, not just for the communities that the developers intend to build, but also for improvements that will serve the best interests of the county. I believe the last time, and I'd like to ask staff about this, that there was a privately initiated land development code amendment. That was a Walmart at Bloomingdale. Is that accurate?
Commissioners, the last privately initiated land development code amendment was the traditional neighborhood development, mixed-use development regulations on which, pursuant to which a Walmart has been developed, yes.
This is a massive project, and I think we need a whole lot more consideration and careful thought about it. The remedies, I think, that have been proposed by the developers are inadequate. The optional community enhancements are largely inside the proposed developments, from what I can tell, and do little or nothing to address the external burdens that this development will create for the county and for the taxpayers. And are really nothing more than minor amenities that are typically provided in all communities now as a selling point within the communities. I want to be looking at the externalities of such a massive project too, and what needs to be done there. And I've thought a bit about what those might be. And I had mentioned earlier, I had calculated out roughly 40,000 trips added to the roads in this area should this all be developed out as stated. That was a very rough estimate, but these are roads that are really undeveloped and could not handle that kind of burden. Brandon and South County are already overburdened. The neighborhoods that are essentially giant cul-de-sacs that overburden our arterials. I think we really need to be looking at this to create a street grid in such a massive area and do better job of looking in the future to be able to move traffic when we look at a big development like this. I've also asked before and like to consider conservation easements, not as a matter of requirement, but as a matter of an ask for the changes that they would want to make in this, that we look at that. I'd also ask staff to look and report back. I understand that Broward County has a robust program of transfer of development rights. I'd like to look at what they have in place so that we could also look at that and consider that, especially in terms of this development and how that might work. Pedestrian amenities, trails, and complete streets, both within this community, but also outside of this community, and all the impacts that we'll have on these very narrow two-lane roads all over the place. I'd like to see those committed to. I'd like to see them on a map. I want to look at the requirements for commercial development to meet community needs close to home, rather than sending people out on long trips and requiring long trips. I think we really need to look at that since they are asking for changes in the way that this goes forward. Finally, schools, I'm not sure that you all had a chance yet to see the memorandum that the schools have sent to us, but basically the Hillsborough County schools have said that they recommended that the developer enter into a development agreement to ensure that school sites and dedicated improvements are funded before this plan is approved by the board. I think we should require this. And reading from this document that the school board sent to us, the district does not have, this is quote, does not have adequate capacity or planned capacity in the schools to absorb the additional students generated by the proposed amendment. The amendment's narrative describes school capacity and school site dedications as optional enhancements, which I just couldn't believe that something as critical and basic as education and schools, when we know they're suffering all over the area, all over our county, the things that schools, the challenges that schools are facing, that these would be optional enhancements. We also know that because of the transportation issues with the 2-mile rule and all that, to say that these would be optional enhancements and not part of the requirement, I think is it's just stunning to me. As the school board says, and this again is, or as the school says, this again is a quote, educational facilities are required per the school facility siting, planning and concurrency interlocal agreement and the comprehensive plan public school facilities element. The amendment as it's currently drafted is inconsistent with this provision of the comprehensive plan, and the school district, Hillsborough County School District, recommends that the county require the development to enter into a development agreement and the district to ensure school sites are dedicated and improvements are funded to meet future facility needs generated by this amendment prior to the plan amendment approval. So I think there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done on this. And finally, the fiscal analysis that was provided by the developer makes no sense. I think we need our own independent fiscal analysis. The developer's fiscal analysis compares the RP2 area to Temple Terrace, an incorporated city with the highest property taxes in the county that was planned in the 1920s. There's no comparison here. I think we need an independent fiscal analysis that makes fair comparisons of projected tax revenues versus financial implications of this development, including transportation impacts and other infrastructure costs that can be expected to be generated. And that's the RP2 statements. I also,
that was a lot.
I know, it was a lot. It was a lot. But I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I think it's a massive project, and we really, this just cannot fly by the night. I think we have a lot of work.
Yeah, okay, I get it. I am going to since this is Mr. Marchetti's issue, I'm going to give him 3 minutes to, not to rebut, but just to, but to give us kind of a brief overview. So, this isn't just a one-sided conversation.
Thank you. Vin Marchetti for the record, representing the 3 applicants and the RP2. It's not a public hearing today, of course. Otherwise, I'd be rebutting everything said. But I just want to get to the motion that Commissioner White had made. I just heard it from the audience here. I guess the one fundamental element I want to talk about is public outreach. We're following the process that Hillsborough County has, along with our working with this county staff, set up. We noticed over 3,000 people for the neighborhood meeting or community meeting held at Riverview High School. We've hired Tucker Hall that's here today. We had a lot of public outreach. So we're happy to do more public outreach. I'll make sure that's clear. But I don't want the record to think, or anyone to think that we haven't been doing any public outreach. That's not correct at all. As far as a potential continuance of the items, my clients would not be thrilled about that. Let me just put it that way. They've been in process for about a year now. We started working on this probably a year and a quarter ago. I guess I just want to make sure that if it is continued, if this board decides as a majority to continue it in the October cycle, that we continue to work on it now, though. We have, just the commissioner mentioned, we have comments coming in now from the school board agencies, from other agencies, other jurisdictions, internally Hillsborough County, external, and we want to make sure we're continuing the dialogue and doing our analysis and updating our analyses. And by the way, the school board comments, you're going to be getting a lot of those because it's a massive issue in all of Hillsborough County, not just South County. We would ask that you not continue it, but if the majority determines you want to continue it, we would ask that you direct staff to continue to work with us now, not in October, but now to continue to isolate the issues, so we can address them. We have a consultant team that's been fully engaged in this. We're happy to meet with more and more people. We've said that from the beginning. Just had a very good meeting with the Baum Civic Association president a couple weeks ago. There's another meeting coming up on the public community outreach meeting. I think it's in July. But we just want to remain engaged and not think we're going to October cycle and all of a sudden now we're into November and December. we want to make sure staff's committed to working with us along the way here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, we don't have a full complement of our commission board here right now. So I think the issue is probably Commissioner White's motion is going to pass, but the only other option would be there is a July cycle, but there's not enough time between now and July. So we're stuck. Because I'm counting votes here. I'm thinking that probably his motion is going to pass to continue it to October. So I do appreciate the fact that that you're realizing that and then working on it. So what steps would we need to take? And I'm going to ask staff to get this thing moving, keep moving it forward, so when October comes, we're not caught behind the 8 ball, or having it to go into the winter months.
Right. Commissioner, if this motion were to pass, it'd be our intent, presuming the board's direction, that we continue to work with the applicant to refine the community options, identify some of the issues that the board has been raised in comments here today, and continue to work through them in shaping the comp plan amendment and the LDC amendment. It's my intent that would continue on rather than stop here and pick it up in October.
Is that agreeable? Because I think we all would like to hear the issues and discuss them, and just like Commissioner Kemp outlined the myriad of issues, how do we get to the bottom of everything?
Right, and my clients want to work with everyone on this, understanding, of course, they have RP2 now, so they could develop, presumably today, literally an RP2. But Commissioner White, we want to make sure it's in his district.
Right.
Work with the commissioner as well. So we're fine, as long as we're, like Adam just said, we're moving ahead. And for example, we have meetings set already, and we're moving ahead.
Okay.
That's all.
So we're going to all be in consensus here about how we're going to move forward. And I think that's the right thing to do. And thank you for coming forward in doing that. So we do have a motion on the.
I have.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner White.
Quick question of staff, and
then
I may withdraw my motion and restate it with a couple of added things. I hope I'll still get a second in that case. But one quick question for staff. At this board's direction, can staff establish a more robust public outreach process than what's currently spelled out in the Land Development Code?
We can look at an additional outreach. I might suggest that perhaps that's something that we could bring back to the board if the board so chooses. There was a public outreach program that was presented and proved it would be appropriate. If we wanted to enhance that and make that more robust, to perhaps bring that back before the board for board consideration.
And as controversial as this issue's been, we actually have potential to arrive at a really good place from a public policy perspective if we gather some of the information that we've talked about today. I'd like to withdraw my motion and restate it and just ever so slightly tweak it a little bit. I'd like to move to continue CPA 17-21 and LDC Amendment 18-0370 to the October Comprehensive Plan Amendment cycle, and have staff and the applicant continue to work on the item in the meantime, and that we continue to receive any applicable agency and department comments as well.
And I think it would be very helpful if commissioners have any particular issue that they also communicate those to staff.
Absolutely.
So that there's a continuous flow of information.
Okay, that's my new motion.
Okay.
Seconded, but I'd also like to ask that we add into the motion to ask that the staff do a fiscal analysis, that an independent fiscal analysis that makes comparisons so that we know of projected future tax revenues and financial implications of the development, including transportation impacts.
Definitely, that's too substantive, so it would need to be an amendment to his motion.
Right.
And
I'm actually even thinking it should just be a separate motion.
Yeah, I'll entertain it as a separate motion.
I think it should
when we
be,
get to
it's
that point.
very expansive, and that's why I wanted to listen to it before I gave you direction, but I think it's pretty expansive. So we have a motion by Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Kemp. Is everybody clear on the motion? Okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
I had that second.
Motion carried 5-0.
And, okay, oh, he has a second part to his motion that he's going to make, and then I'll come to you.
Since I had referenced it when I initially had the floor, this will just take a moment. Ms. Zornita, I just have a really quick question for you just to cue this issue up. How many sources are we seeing population projection numbers from?
So we have utilized the Bureau of Economic and Business Research out of the University of Florida, which is the statewide source that is traditionally utilized. We also looked at another source that Woods and Pool, that is a more business. They do this as their business, looking at population projections and employment projections. But we felt most comfortable in discussing with the staffs of all 4 jurisdictions with sticking with the Bieber projections.
Okay. I guess I'll ask our staff, would you agree that you're most comfortable with the Bieber projections?
It's Commissioner, that is the standard projection that,
Right.
that we would use for these. Comfortable using that, recognizing there is a range within those Bieber predictions.
Absolutely.
Sure. This is probably just a formality at this point, but I've been speaking with staff about this issue, so this motion has been vetted by staff, and I know upper level staff is agreeable to it. But I would move that the Board of County Commissioners make a policy statement today at this meeting that it's the Bieber population numbers that we'll use in county planning.
Well, I mean, that's, to me, I kind of gets into like a little bit of micromanagement. I think you guys should use the one that's most appropriate. I would know a Bieber method from another method, but I would rely on you in using the best. But we'll hear from another commissioner, Commissioner Miller.
We didn't get a second to that. We didn't get a second.
Oh, did you? I thought you were just have you actually made the motion? Oh, okay. Is there a second to his motion? Let me ask.
I'll second it for discussion.
For discussion. Okay. Commissioner Miller?
Well, I agree with you, Commissioner Miller. That's more of micromanaging. I mean, the Bieber has been utilized even by the state of Florida. We used that when we were in Tallahassee.
Right.
From the University of Florida. It's been utilized forever. So I don't think that's a motion that needs to be, at this particular point, I don't think it's a motion that needs to be made at all, because I think since we've been here, that's the one that we've been using. We did it with, prior to 2010, what I want to say, reapportionment. And we've done it ever since that particular point in time. So I don't think they've used anything else but that. I don't think the motion
I don't think we need it.
at this particular point in time.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Would it be appropriate, you think, for me to make my motion now with regards to the fiscal?
Wait, did you withdraw?
No, I'm done. She
You're
withdrew her
done?
second.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
So, as I said before, and actually it was kind of interesting that this came as part of this presentation, the bigger presentation, which I still haven't spoken to, but I really would like to see us have an independent fiscal analysis. As I said, for the RP2, an independent fiscal analysis, as I looked at the one that was done, that makes fair comparisons of projected tax revenues versus the financial implications of this development, including transportation impacts and other infrastructure costs that can be expected to be generated.
Go ahead.
I'll just add to that, that as I saw the larger presentation here, I think we are desperately in need of this information. And I've seen counties all over the country that have had this kind of review so that they can make wiser decisions vis-a-vis the taxable value of their property and best choices in terms of development moving forward. I'd actually like to see the whole county evaluated on that basis. And there's excellent presentations that analysis that have been done. I know for other counties, I saw Sarasota's, and it seems to me that we could really, really benefit by that. But I bring it up in terms of the RP2, but also actually in terms of the entire county. I think it could be a really valuable tool for us.
Madam Chair, may I ask the maker of the motion to repeat her motion?
Yes, I was just going to do that.
Okay, my motion is, and I just add that we need an independent fiscal analysis that makes fair comparisons. I move to have an independent fiscal analysis that makes fair comparisons of projected tax revenues versus financial implications of this development, the RP2, including transportation impacts and other infrastructure costs that can be expected to be generated.
Question for the maker of the motion?
Okay, we need to get a second.
I can ask a question of the maker.
After the second.
All right, I'll second for the sake of discussion.
Okay, you're recognized.
All right, so the question would be, when you say independent, do you mean independent of the applicant, which means that our own county staff could conduct the analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and as I said before, the applicant did an analysis, but it was based on Temple Terrace and an incorporated city with the highest property taxes in the county. I'd like to consider something broader than that, but yes, it could be done by county staff.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Commissioner White. Are you still at your second? I want to ask staff, would this comparison or analysis, has this ever been done before, or would this be, I guess I'll ask a second part, would this be part of the normal analysis of the project?
Commissioner, I think what we're talking about here is something, it is different than what staff would typically do for a plan amendment. As I'm understanding this, it is a different scale of amendment, and that's why this is being sought. But to answer your question, this is not,
not normal.
This wouldn't be
your normal scope of business. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, very good. That's why I wanted to ask. Okay, so we have, can you repeat your motion again?
Yes. Okay. I'm moving for an independent fiscal analysis that makes fair comparisons of projected tax revenues versus financial implications of this development, including transportation impacts and other infrastructure costs that can be expected to be generated.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Commissioner White. Is there any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion carried 5-0.
I guess nothing would prevent the applicant from doing their independent analysis either, so.
They've already done one, or their analysis. That's the Temple Terrace one that I'm referring to, where they compared it to Temple Terrace.
Okay,
They've already got that. So I thought we should have an independent analysis outside of that.
Okay.
Which I thought wasn't a good comparison at all for what this is.
Okay, very good. We haven't done K2 yet, have we? Okay, I just want to give a comment on your presentation. I thought it was very good. But I have been sitting on almost every major transportation committee since I've been on this board. And I find like the planning committee and the MPO, generally, this is kind of their bailiwick, so to speak. This is their deal. I'm just kind of surprised to get a transportation presentation from the Planning Commission. And it's kind of like, here we go again. Who's in charge? Now we got another thing to look at and discuss. And I'm not criticizing. I think it's a great presentation because you limited it down to 3 scenarios. But I think coming from the MPO would have been better.
Well,
that's just my 2 cents.
That is who is, I mean, if I may respond.
You've got Plan Hillsborough on here.
Right, which we are a consolidated agency that serves all 3 boards. And so we serve the Planning Commission, we serve the MPO. I was coming to you all in response to your request to hear about the land use and the population and job projections, and felt it was important for you all sitting as the Board of County Commissioners to hear about what the MPO was working on in the regional context, because it is influencing the work that the Planning Commission is doing. And not all 7 members of the board are on the MPO. So I felt it was important that you all heard that. We're taking the same presentation to all 3 cities as well, to make sure everybody is apprised of what the MPO is doing because it influences and the work that what the Planning Commission is doing, and what the Planning Commission is doing on the population influences what the MPO is doing. They work together.
I just would have liked to have seen it come through the MPO.
Sure.
Because it is about routes and it's about everything transportation. I didn't even see a lot of land use in here, personally. I didn't see it. But it's a good presentation. I just think that it should come, I mean, you've got Titled 1, MPO Regional Transportation Scenarios and Outreach. I mean, yet this is part of the confusion we have when we're out in the community. Who's in charge? Who's running the show? Who's the leader? And it's just like when we get one more set of information going out to people, that they get confused, and that's why we can't get anything passed. So that's the issue. So Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'd also like to say I thought it was a really good, solid scenario. I guess I feel kind of the opposite, because I think there's in the public like a confusion about where to go to for what and who's in charge of what. And but I think that these things are integral, that they're related totally, and that I've wanted to see them dealt with in a comprehensive way with the transportation and land use together. It's exactly what I've wanted to see. What differences and what was used is the major scenarios, I think, that have been presented to the public, and kind of what I saw was these are the major things that are being talked about in terms of transportation. This is the impacts that it would have in our land use planning, and I think I think it was done very well in terms of putting the kinds of discussions that are out there about what we're having in the future and how that would impact how we go forward with land use in the future. And I liked that it was combined like that and done with that in mind. I think one without the other either is not a valuable way to move forward for a discussion. And then just in terms of talking about it, I thought the scenarios were just very well done and really put out there. And these are just smaller things, but I think, there's not been, and I know it's drilling down a bit, but the whole, we hear so much about AV vehicles and driverless cars and kind of some assumptions about somehow that's going to solve all our transportation problems, that we won't have congestion if we have driverless cars, that they're going to be able to do everything. And I think that there's a huge, also school of thought out there that as long as we continue with single occupancy vehicles and maybe negative occupancy vehicles with driverless cars, that we may be in for a world that is way worse than we ever imagined.
We're talking about scenarios.
Right. And so I just wanted to say that maybe in terms of that scenario, some, drilling down on that. But I liked it that you did the transit-oriented, the kind of mixed, and the first one. I thought that was valuable. And I guess I was ready to respond that I did like that they were mixed like that. And I thought that was...
I didn't see enough mix, so that's the problem. And I see too much confusion, so that's the only thing. So Commissioner Miller, you recognize.
Oh, Madam Chair, I don't see it as a confusion. I think that one of the things that did come out of what Commissioner Kemp just said, which was a mouthful, is that transportation and land use has to work hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so does the Planning Commission and the MPO. They have to work hand in hand. So to have the executive director of the Planning Commission come before the land use body itself, to me, makes all the sense in the world. Now, if we hadn't have had that here, and it been the MPO, even though two of the members are not here, maybe those who don't serve in the MPO would not have seen this. Those who serve in the MPO that on this commission may not have seen this information. So I think it's appropriate to have the Planning Commission executive director to come here to give this, because we are dealing with land use. So I don't see, and I don't think it's a confusion at all with the public. I really, really don't.
Well, no, they get confused when they see so many different plans and so many different people going out to them, so many different public hearings.
They're getting one plan. It's just coming from different people. The same plan is there.
This is not the same plan.
Well, Commissioner Merman, I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill. No. And I don't think that that's something we need to be. I mean, the executive director of the Planning Commission came before us as a land use body to talk about transportation. The bit that's in here is a good plan with the land use. If it was an MPO body, I could see it. But it's not an MPO body. This is a land use. So I think what the appropriate person that came before us today is the appropriate person to be here. If we were before the MPO, then Ms. Alden would be standing there, and they'd probably be doing the same thing and saying the same thing. So I don't see it.
Very good. Very good. Oh, let's just move on. K2.
Well, I'm the one person that's sitting up here that doesn't sit on either one of those. And I appreciated, even though I may not have been sitting in the seat through all of it, there was a situation with my daughter. I had to step off the floor for a moment, but I was still listening in. And I found it very interesting, and as usual, very thorough and easy to understand, which you're very good at doing. I'm kind of between the two parties here. I am appreciative that you put this together and brought it forward, but I'm inclined to agree with my colleague next to me that we need to be careful that we're speaking with one voice and we're presenting one comprehensive plan, because people get confused out there and they see a lot of different mixed messages. And so we've got to be careful that we're all working together on the same page.
Absolutely.
I told you I thought it was good, what you presented. I'm just mixed messages. Okay, K2. K2.
So K2, you should have an item in your backup that I can put this up on the Elmo. Regarding the fees that are charged for plan amendment applications. This was a request at one of your board meetings in May that we bring this back. So these are the fees that are charged for text or small-scale amendments, which small-scale amendments for Hillsborough County are anything less than 500 acres, and then the fees for large-scale amendments. Most other communities that we were asked to compare with these 4 counties make the small, large-scale threshold at 10 acres. These fees are set by each jurisdiction, and then the Planning Commission gets them from the applicant on your behalf. I don't have much of a presentation, but I'm here to answer questions.
It's very good. It's very good. Commissioner Kemp, because I believe you asked for this, right?
I did.
Yes, you did. You're recognized.
Thank you. So I did ask the Planning Commission to review the fees our county charges developers who file applications to amend the county's long-range comprehensive plan. Do you know, or you have information on what year Hillsborough's current fees were set?
Our current fees were set in 1986.
It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've been more than 30 years, decades, without resetting those.
I'm trying to change our districts. 30 years.
Well, I'm afraid this is a little more serious here, but that's more than 30 years. And what is the fee to file the comprehensive plan amendment here? Can you speak to that again? I know I...
Sure. Most plan amendments are $1,000, plus we charge for each advertisement in the newspaper. If it is an amendment over 500 acres, it's $3,000.
Okay. So thank you for preparing this. The comparison between the fees that the Hillsborough County Commission charges developers with private applications to amend the comprehensive plan. I mean, I think when I look at this, I'm stunned by it. So Pasco counties are higher, much higher, with an upward limit of 25,000, right?
Yes.
Manatee has an upward limit of 20,000.
Yes.
And Broward's fees are all the same. That's $17,625.
Yes.
And Palm Beach goes up to $14,960 plus $34 per 100 acres.
Yes, that's the research we found.
Yeah, and they also have a continuance fee of $4,500.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So all of the other 4 jurisdictions, I notice, make a distinction between small-scale plan amendments of 10 acres or less and a large-scale plan amendment greater than 10 acres. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And large-scale and small-scale amendments are defined by state law?
Yes.
And the large-scale plan amendments are subject to more processes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, Hillsborough's fee schedule puts a higher fee of $3,000 only at 500 acres, rather than 10 acres like all we're seeing here. Again, but that fee of $3,000, as meager as it is, that fee hasn't been charged in the last 5 years?
Correct. We haven't had a map amendment that covered that kind of acreage.
And that fee wasn't even charged in the case of the RP2 amendment that we were looking at and just discussed?
That's correct. That is a text amendment to the text of the future land use elements, so it was charged $1,000.
Mm-hmm. And I just looked quickly at the Palm Beach when I added up the county acreage that they would have created, and I came up with that same RP2 would have cost $29,900 had it been in Palm Beach, and upwards of $20,000 and $25,000 in these other plans. And I also looked at the amount that the Planning Commission has taken in over the last 5 years, both for plan amendments and the analysis of rezonings, or asked that you do that. And what did you find with that?
I did not bring my copy of it right off so I apologize. I don't have the.
That's okay.
Hand.
I just pulled it together quickly. Fiscal year 13, $41,000. Fiscal year 14, $47,000. Fiscal year 15, $53,000. Fiscal year 16, $77,000. And fiscal year 17, $69,000. And that includes everything. If I just went to the plan amendments in fiscal year 13, $5,000. Plan amendments, 14, 10,000. Plan amendments, 11,015, 27,016, and 12,017. I think that this is just really like stunning and terrible. Those figures sounded about right to you and I.
Yes.
Yeah. And how does this compare to your annual budget?
Gosh, a percentage off the top of my head. It's a very small percentage of our budget. Now, the revenue that we collect for the fees goes into the county general fund. It does not come back to the Planning Commission budget.
Right, and you're paid out of the county general funds. Yes. You're not paid by fees.
Correct.
So your budget was something about $4 4.5 million
Yes.
in all, mostly for personnel.
Yeah.
And so the countywide tax dollars are paying for the personnel of the Planning Commission as well as development services, which while your budget's $4.5 million, development services is something like 20 million, and we're still ready to get the information on that. They're working that out because that's a little bit more complicated. But I also had asked you specifically, when I look at Pasco County, just 10 miles to the north, this RP2 that was $1,000 here, and every single plan in the last 5 years that has been $1,000, if you're in Pasco County, the RP2 would have been 10 miles to the north, over $25,000. And in all these counties would have been over $20,000 and somewhere $30,000. And let me tell you, I pulled Miami-Dade, and I couldn't believe it. It's $122,000 for a plan amendment in Miami-Dade. At any rate,
They're a bunch of criminals.
yeah, well, they're getting it. I also asked you to find out specifically what criteria that Pasco used to arrive at their fees.
Yes, and unfortunately, we have not been able to get from Pasco County how they established their fees in 2012. I've even spoken to their attorney. They have not been able to produce the study that arrived at that.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can get my hands on that, but in the meantime, I think it would be valuable for us to find out how Manatee, Broward, and Palm Beach also arrived at the fees that they have. And I want to take a closer look and review these. I think that these figures are stunning, really kind of do not speak well for us on this part in terms of what the taxpayers are subsidizing and what we should be looking at to process this.
Commissioner Christ, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little less concerned about how the others calculated their fee structures. I'm more concerned about how we need to calculate ours. I don't want to see the taxpayers subsidizing anything dealing with this, if possible, and I'd like to see you calculate out what the true cost is for handling these various different documents and procedures that you've got to go through.
Well, we did have a fee study done in 2016 and 17 by Tyndale Oliver, and they analyzed, because we keep track of staff time by amendment. However, so they utilizing that information, were able to, they arrived at a fee of $4,000. That does not include in the calculations that they used any of the overhead things that are done for all the amendments, but it was based on the time that staff spends on each individual plan amendment.
So there needs to be then an interim analysis that analyzes the bridge between what we're collecting, how we're collecting, and what the average cost is to determine whether we're bringing in enough to cover those expenses.
Today we're not. I mean, today the fee is $1,000, and what Tyndale Oliver said, the cost of the staff time when they're just reviewing that one plan amendment was $4,000. So, but there is additional time. Certainly, we do things like create the advertisement for the newspaper. Maps
right, but our fee structure here is anywhere between $1,000 and $3,000.
Right.
So we may be off, but we may not be that far off.
That's at least what the study that Tyndale Oliver produced for us.
So why, Commissioner Chris, why don't you just make a motion to have staff look this over, meet with the industry, study it more with Tyndale, and then come back with a recommendation?
You were reading my mind, and that's the motion that I'm making.
I'll second that.
Okay. So
Thank
we have
you,
a
Madam Chair.
motion on the floor by Commissioner Chris, second by Commissioner White, and next in the queue is Commissioner Miller. You're recognized.
Commissioner Chris did what I was going to do, so.
Okay, so we're done. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Well, I think what we're charging is truly scandalous. And we're asking taxpayers here are subsidizing this development. And it's time for those who are asking for this development to pay reasonable fees. If they're charging $25,000 for the same development in Pasco County and $30,000 for the same development in Broward County, that we're charging $1,000 here, in the last year we made only $12,000 on our plan amendments. This is, and it's $4.5 million for the Planning Commission in support. It's $20 million for our development department. I think it's truly, I think we're not, I think we are way far off, and that's why I was trying to find the basis of what Pasco County did and Broward and Palm Beach. So I have asked for that. I'd like to find those bases first. I think we are massively off, and you know, I'm going to bring this up once I get more information for us for reconsideration of a really increased fee scale. So
I think Commissioner Chris' motion probably gets to that point. And so I think you can work with staff and we can all come to agreement on what the real fee should be.
Based on real costs.
Based on real costs. Yeah. Okay, great. So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Chris, seconded by Commissioner White. Seeing no further discussion, please record your vote.
Motion carried 4-1. Commissioner Kemp voted no.
Oh. Okay. I need to make a motion before we leave the land use meeting. Are we leaving the land use meeting to get? Yes, we are. This is very simple, so I'm going to pass the gavel to my vice chair. I'd like to direct the Planning Commission to add policy language to the comprehensive plan that prohibits the development of submerged lands.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor made by Commissioner Merman. Is there a second? Second. We have a second. Open for discussion?
None.
Seeing no discussion, the clerk shall open the board for a vote.
Motion carried 5-0.
Oh, if y'all been reading in the paper about how people are getting titles to submerged lands to try and fill them in and develop condos and different things. It's not good. Okay, do we have to adjourn this meeting? Are we going to?
Going into the Planning Commission and Land Development Code workshops.
Okay, because it doesn't say adjournment on my...
You're right, I'm sorry. Looks we can remain in the land use VOCC meeting.
Okay, I'd like to get through this really quickly, like in the next 15 minutes, so because most of us have to come back here at 6 o'clock for a very long, extended public hearing tonight.
Yes, sir.
So, yes, it will be long. We do have one continued already, 5A, so who do I turn this over? You.
Hello.
Okay, great.
Hello.
Randy, take over.
Randy Kranchak, Planning Commission staff, here for Krista Kelly. These will be brief.
No votes are taken.
Pardon me?
No votes will be taken.
No, just a briefing.
Just presentation.
Just the facts that we have to date. So, Comprehensive Plan Amendment 18-0-05 in Hillsborough County is on Timmins Road in the Thonona-Sassa area. It's a privately initiated map amendment. This is the rural area. It's the Thonona-Sassa Community Planning Area. You can see the site here on Timmins Road, on the east side of Timmins Road. The site is currently agricultural estate on the future land use map for unincorporated county, 1 dwelling unit per 2.5 acres. The request is for residential 2 dwelling units per acre. So here you see the agricultural estate. This area over here is mostly residential 1, and then we do have some enclaves recognized of residential 2. So the impacts under the adopted plan at agricultural estate on approximately 40 acres, you could do 15 dwelling units. Under residential 2, you could do potentially up to 78 dwelling units. The site does not meet locational criteria for non-residential development. Our next steps will be a Planning Commission public hearing on August 13th. And if there's any questions on that one, I'll be happy to answer them.
Sure, Kemp.
Thank you. Can we just go back to, is that the urban service line I see, so that it's outside the urban service? The first one?
Yes.
Or is that it?
No, it's outside. It's in the rural area.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And when you say enclaves on the other side of it?
Well, what I mean, Commissioner, is this little area down here, for example.
Okay.
It's most likely pre-plan at a density much higher than what we see typically out in that area.
And what about the whole yellowed area that is to the east?
Again?
No, to the east. This, no, down below.
Bright yellow.
Right, this huge area.
Light yellow.
That's all agricultural estate,
Okay.
1 to 2.5 acres.
Mm-hmm. And what is it to the north and south?
This is residential 1 over here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You have any further questions? Are you done? Commissioner Kim, are you done? Oh, okay. Okay, ready for 2?
Sure.
2.
Okay, so this is another privately initiated amendment, 18-06. It's in the Brandon area near the intersection of Lithia Pinecrest Road and Lumsden Road. You can see the site there on the aerial. In the urban service area, in the Brandon community planning area, and again, just southwest of the intersection of Lithia Pinecrest Road and Lumsden Road. It's a heavily treed site, approximately 8 acres. The intersection is commercial in nature, and the surrounding area is suburban and residential in nature. So the adopted future land use plan for this site is residential 4, and you see residential 4 in total south of Lumsden Road. You see some residential 6 on the north side of Lumsden Road, and some residential 9 as well at the northeast quadrant of Lumsden Road. The applicant on this amendment is requesting residential 9. The impacts would be with a 4 dwelling unit per acre category, which it currently is, 32 dwelling units, could go to 72 dwelling units potentially under Res 9, and with 8 acres, and the floor area ratio in the Res 4, maximum would be a little over 88,000 square feet. The residential 9 category has a little higher floor area ratio, and you could get up to 100. You could potentially get up to just a little over 123,000 square feet. So again, the same next steps. Planning Commission hearing in August.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions? Commissioner White.
Thank you. Really, I just have 2 brief statements. One is, I'm likely to ultimately support this one because some Res 9 has been established in the general area of that intersection. A precedent has been set. But I really don't feel that we should push any further east with Res 9, so I would ask staffs of both the county and the Planning Commission to consider that for any future requests to amend the comprehensive plan. Also, what I learned from staff in my briefing is that, if I understood you correctly, we don't have a suburban scale description in our comprehensive in our documents. Period. We only describe urban scale and rural scale. Is that correct?
Those are the 2 service areas we have, either urban or rural service area.
I would like to ask staff to consider bringing something back for this board to consider that describes an urban development scale, a suburban development scale, and a rural scale. As we mentioned, in our briefing, when you cross over into Res 9, that starts to take an urban scale in my mind, whereas I think of, loosely Res 3, Res 4, Res 6, I think of that as more suburban, possibly Res 2, and then everything else rural. So I'd like to see how we could somehow begin to differentiate between the three versus just the two.
Yes, sir. And if I could, in our land use tables in the back of our future land use element, we do a description of all the categories. And for instance, residential 4, residential 6, like you just mentioned, are described as suburban type development, suburban residential, and suburban scale commercial.
Okay.
Now, just one last comment. With our plan update for the entire county, our intent is to do a vision map like the city of Tampa has, something that everyone can look at and see, and what is the anticipated development pattern for a certain area.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as much as I believe in infill, I mean, I still think you have to have a logical transition between areas. So in my mind, I think this is probably the easternmost point that I'd like to see, Res 9, continue. So.
Okay, very good.
I have one question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
It's okay, thank you. For clarification, everything south of Lumsden Road that is in that lighter yellow, whatever that color is, that's around this property, that's all Res 4?
Res 4.
Okay. So this would break all that development pattern, and then above it's, what is that, the bright yellow?
This is residential 6.
Okay, but it would break with the entire area there south of Lumsden Road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Number 3.
All right. This one, Commissioners, is a publicly initiated text amendment regarding legally non-conforming mobile home parks. And there's an accompanying code amendment as well that I believe DSD will, Department of Development Services, will discuss. But again, publicly initiated text amendment to the future land use element. We're adding a new policy under innovative housing, policy 21.4, that I'll get into in a moment, and we're proposing modifying policy 9.3 to address the new policy. So the language for the new policy, I'm going to read it very quickly, where mobile home parks in the urban service area have lawfully permitted densities which exceed the comprehensive plan. Redevelopment of affordable housing is permissible at the same density pursuant to the affordable housing requirements of the Land Development Code. Such projects shall be exempt from the density bonus qualifying criteria found in the comprehensive plan's housing element. So essentially, a mobile home park in the urban service area that's legally non-conforming to the density of the plan could redevelop with other affordable housing options.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. And then policy 3 in the future land use element speaks to legal non-conforming uses and permitting, et cetera, et cetera. However, we would put except in conformance with policy 21.4, which would then go on and make it allow for those legally non-conforming mobile home parks to redevelop with different housing types, affordable housing types.
Okay, Tony Garcia.
That concludes that particular one, correct? Yeah, I just wanted to add, in case you all were wondering, item number 3 was withdrawn by the applicant. We went to number 4 there. We were on item.
Oh, I
apologize.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought we were on number
we're on
3.
4A. We're on 4A.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's.
Number 3 was withdrawn by the applicant.
Okay.
I apologize for not telling you that ahead of Mr. Kranchek jumping into
Well,
item
4A was my issue that I brought to the commission because of just the condition of mobile home parks, especially in South County, where we really have opportunity for redevelopment into affordable housing and tiny homes and different, there's so many options. So Okay, great. Thanks. 4B.
Commissioners, 4B is a land development code amendment, and this would be the companion to 4A CPA 1808, and this would provide implementing language in the land development code to facilitate the conversion of non-conforming mobile home park densities to affordable housing at the same density. It's basically a companion to the comp plan amendment that Randy just described.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And 5B.
Commissioners, the next two items actually, so 1721.
Was continued.
Yeah, that's 1721, which was requested to be continued by Commissioner White. You have, if you would like to be briefed on this, we'll be more than happy to brief you on what we currently have. That's entirely up to you.
Would you like that to be?
You know, what, it'd take about 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah, I'd like to see where we currently stand, because where I had left off is I had asked the applicant and staff to look at making these proposed enhancements transportation intensive. So, and I know there's even...
And I would say, I think it's helpful to have the briefing. I would characterize that as still as a work in progress with our discussions.
I say we just hold off on the briefing then. Okay. Yeah, you'll keep the board apprised.
Yeah, if you're coming back and we're going to do all this work, if you don't think...
That's fine.
Okay, 5B.
That was continued as well, wasn't it?
5B was continued?
Maybe not.
That's the companion LDC.
That's the companion to 5A, so it's continued also.
Okay, so we're done.
Okay, is there any other business?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Miller?
This is not on the agenda. We need to, some way, somehow, with staff in our briefings, with land use and probably with staff from Mr. Merrill's office, try to figure out a time that, especially when we have long agendas like this, that when you're meeting with other commissioners, some way, somehow figure out how you spread the time out that all commissioners get briefings. Yesterday, I didn't get a briefing because it's not your fault at all, not your fault at all. You were 25 minutes late. My schedule was jam-packed, and you would have had a brief from me for 5 minutes because you were tied with another commissioner in a briefing. And that's not fair to any commissioner when you're late coming in because you were some other commissioner, because that commissioner wanted a briefing, and then another commissioner gets missed out on a briefing, specifically on important issues like we had today. I didn't have a briefing yesterday. I must admit I was a little upset, but that wasn't your fault because of the mere fact that I missed the briefing and my schedule was that tight. So I don't know how we can do this or what you can do. I don't know if we change scheduling times, whatever the case may be, maybe a lot more than 30 minutes, maybe an hour or so. But for a commissioner to miss a briefing within a packed agenda like we had today, I didn't even feel comfortable coming here today because there were some things I just totally missed out on because I didn't get a briefing yesterday. So I don't know what we can do, but that should not happen. That's to me, that's kind of putting kind of a disrespectful move that it's not your fault, but the fact of the matter is, you know what your schedule is. You're not going to sit there and tell a commissioner, I got to leave because I have another appointment with another commissioner. But we need to work something out because with these issues are too important. It looks like our land use meetings are getting more and more intense with items because things are starting to look up. And I have no problem with Mr. Merrill's issues also. I mean, he's been late to my meetings also. It's not your fault. He's come in my office late because the commissioner before me had him in there longer than what his time was allotted. So on your point, maybe we can work something out. I don't know what we can do, but something has to happen. That's not your fault.
I think we should authorize them to tell that they can say to a commissioner in the briefing that my next briefing is coming up and we need to go.
Yeah, either if, let them know that, and then if the commissioner needs to have more briefing, if there's a free time that you have that day, the commissioners are available, you can go back and talk to the commissioner after that time frame. But if you have a meeting with another commissioner, you feel have them, say, hey, commissioner, we have another meeting with another commissioner. Can we get back with you some other time today if we have some free time? Something along those lines. But it's just not fair to have another commissioner miss out on a briefing because the other commissioner kept them too long.
I agree.
And commissioners, we will do a better job. I'll do a better job of coordinating and communicating that. I do apologize, Commissioner Miller, for for the lack of briefing yesterday, but take the comment here. We'll make sure that we make each briefing office aware of what our schedule is relative to future briefings as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, the issues are more complex, and if our staff aren't scheduling the right amount of time, then we've also got to make them aware. When you're scheduling, maybe you should tell the staff, we have a long agenda, we need more time, so that we don't run on top of each other.
But understand, I don't want to put that onus on your back. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Okay?
Good.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Miller, for bringing that up. Okay, we are adjourned.
Okay.